Good morning and welcome to the Land Grant Seminar Series, 2025 Spring Semester Series. So I just want to let you know that we are full for the remaining of the semester. So we will have, you can see here the speaker for next week, Ambassador Eric Bost from the Borlaug Institute. He will be talking to us. And the rest of the semester, as you can see, is full. We are accepting suggestion for speakers for this fall semester, which will be here in no time. So if you have any suggestion on who's to invite, we will encourage you to reach out to Professor Awal or myself to schedule you for that. So with that, I would like to call on Dr. Quinlan to introduce our speaker for today. Dr. Quinlan.
Thank you. Just hold this. So there are a lot of slides. I'm not going to read all this, but because I'm introducing a friend, not all this. Dr. Feng has been a good friend and colleague. She got her bachelor's in food engineering from South China University of Technology, and then her master's and her PhD in food sensory sciences and then food sciences at UC Davis. And so she is currently, as you'll see, it's not up there. She's an associate professor in food science at Purdue University. So she has many wonderful accomplishments. Again, many peer-reviewed journals and sponsored research. She does, as she's going to talk to you, look at food safety from a socio-ecological approach, which is something we share and therefore have worked together on. She's received the Larry Boucher Young Researcher Award from IAFP, Institute of Food Safety. And she's served on USDA's National Advisory Committee on Microbiological Criteria in Foods. Are you currently serving on that? It just got
terminated.
It's terminated, but you're in the current one. Okay, yes, and she's so she's also been on a editorial board on the Journal of Food Protection and Food Protection Trends. She is a dedicated mentor. I can say that because we were at a conference last week in Houston. So this is our second week back in Houston in 2 weeks because we had a food safety education conference last week. And she had a lovely group of students and postdocs and is a great mentor. They spoke highly of her. So I look forward to her talk. I would just point out she comes with a really unique perspective in that she is a tenure track faculty, but also an extension specialist. So that's a combination we don't have here at Prairie View, which might be something to aim towards because it really combines that the research and the extension. So I let her talk about her position and some of her work.
We have research, we have a teaching and extension, but
not the research.
we all do extension, but not
Yeah,
official.
yeah. Oh, yeah. No, and but that's it. She's official. She's official. She's got the title.
Sounds good. Thank you very much. Thank you for the introduction. So whenever I introduce myself, I'm from a food science background. So everyone thought like what I do is like that, right? So in a wet lab, and I deal with the benchtop work. So actually addressing food safety is not just about benchtop work. I have a group of wonderful colleagues who excels in the benchtop work, but there are people who needs to try to bridge the gap. So I want to try to become someone like that. So CDC estimates that 1 in 6 Americans are getting sick from foodborne illness. And every year, we are facing nearly $100 billion that caused by foodborne illnesses. If we calculate each household, so that's a like median household income for the household. So I like using this analogy. Basketball is a big thing in a Big Ten university. So whenever you play basketball, it's not just about we score. We go ahead and score. It's also about defense. So if you think about defense, you need the techniques. You need to know what you should do on the court. And you also need to practice those techniques. And then you really need the teamwork to make everything cohesive and work together. So I feel like it's very similar to how we conduct our food defense. We don't want the bacteria to score on our court, right? So we want to have a good defense. So our players are the farmers, the processors, transportation workers, retailers, and consumers. We need the techniques, which is we need to train everybody on the court to properly handle the food. And we need to practice. We need to make sure that they not only know what to do, but also they actually will do it. So that's the behavior. And third is the teamwork. We need to approach food safety not just by relying on the farmers or relying on the end consumers. We have to approach it systematically, try to get everyone on board. So when we talk about behavior change, if you think about educating in this room, everyone works with students. We want them to attend the seminar. That's a behavior change. It's not just about we tell them that it's important to come to listen to other people's perspective. It's more than knowledge. We know that it takes some route. So we borrow from different areas. We learn from, before me, there are a lot of great scientists like Dr. Quinlan, like many other scientists. We borrow those conceptual models. So for example, this is one of the conceptual models we use to understand how are we going to change people's behavior around food. So in this model, attitudes is important. You need to let them know that what they do actually is important. And then subjective norm, let them know that what they do actually impacts how people around them will look at them. So, and then last but not least is the perceived behavioral control. Even if they know, I need to do that, this is important. If I do so, my coworkers will feel like I'm cool. But they still need to have the ability to do it, right? So you need to teach them how to do it. And also, if you want them to wash hands, you need to provide them the washing station. So all of those factors all impacts whether or not a person will change their behavior. So the more we study people's behavior around foods, the more, frankly speaking, we are confused. There are their perceptions of foods, their habits around the foods, their culture. We are from different culture. Each household has their own food culture, food traditions, and the convenience. That's where like food accessibility comes in, and awareness and self-efficacy. So I try to package all of those factors in this little box. I tell my students that let's call it, all of those are our human factors. It's not just the physical properties of the food, but also people around it, how we act around the food are the human factor that impacts what we're going to do and how we do it. So I would like to start my presentation with how I try to build my program around research and extension. So at first, I tried to identify who I would like to serve and who needs the service. So I identified 4 group of target audiences that I worked with. So underrepresented families, there are new immigrants, they live in their own communities, they may even speak their own languages. And military veteran farmers, we have, I think, even a larger population of military veteran farmers here in Texas. Small food processors, including food entrepreneurs and public school students. So when I try to build this program, I have 2 major pillars, extension and research. So the extension, so my research can help enhancing my extension, and the extension can increase the impact of the research. That's how I see why we should have an integrated program. So that's on the basis, we also need to think about how we can bring this resilience to the food system, so how we can better serve our community. So with those 4 programs I mentioned, I try to look at my program, the audiences I serve. I need to think about what kind of program they need and how am I going to sustain those programs with targeted funding. So with this presentation, I'm going to give you 2 examples of how I engage my audiences. And then I'm going to share some research topics that I currently or previously conducted, try to show you how those applied research works hand in hand with extension. So like I said, I serve those audiences. This short example is about how I worked with military veteran farmers. So at first, I do not have a military background. So at first, I felt a little bit challenging, like to get into the circle, because there are pockets of veteran farmers, they help each other, and they always have good intentions. They want to grow. So I quote one of my previous participants saying, she said, "I want to grow instead of kill. That's why I want to farm." So for a lot of farmers, they could be military nurses, they could even be pilots, but now they become farmers, just like no better. I described some of our farmers when they've started, they could be no better than consumers. They need to learn how to farm and how to build a business. But in the same time, food safety sometimes could be on the bottom of the list because they need to survive, the farm need to survive. So the very first approach was we conducted a needs assessment around the state of Indiana. Try to understand, if we want to approach this group, how are we going to approach them? And what are the topics they are most interested in? So by developing surveys, interviews, and conducting those needs assessment, we were able to publish this also as a publication. And then we started to develop workshops. This is an example, like the military veteran farmers came to our university kitchens to learn about canning, some hands-on experiences. And also we noticed that they do much better when they have learning circles. So instead of invite those veteran farmers to come to a bigger circle of farmers outside of their circle, they feel much more comfortable, meet people just like them. So we started learning circles for veteran farmers, and we started to develop newsletters and we take a small part of their already had like veteran farmer group email list. So we will started from a very small column, and then they wanted requested more and more topics. So we started to develop to engage with them, and eventually we were successfully develop a program and from the state level and extended to a national level. So another example was our previous work with low-income families. So based on some previous work I conducted in my postdoc years, I conducted home visits with low-income families with young children. And we noticed that this group of audiences, the lack of food safety knowledge and also lack of the tools. We tell them you can use separate cutting boards. But a lot of the times when I visit the homes, either they recently moved to some location, they hardly has places to put like separate cutting boards. Even if they have, they could not really find it. So it's been very, very challenging to reinforce things that, remember what I said, perceived behavioral control, right? So they know, even if you tell them you should use separate cutting boards, and if you use it, your family will feel better, like they feel good, like, oh, my dad or my mom is cooking, like knows to separate. But if they cannot afford or they cannot find it, it doesn't really work. So there are a lot of things we notice that we can improve, but also we notice that a lot of the times those food safety education, either videos or modules we're showing this audience, are taken from, I don't want to say this, but a middle class, beautiful kitchen, right? So that make people feel like that's not me. That's not my kitchen. Yes, you can do that in your kitchen, but I cannot do that in my kitchen. So we started to try to develop materials that models from a regular apartment that where they live in. And we try to show them pictures and videos that we take using the same cookingware and tools they have available. So we also conducted program evaluation. That's the research piece. It's important for us as extension specialists or extension educators. We try to engage our audiences, try our best to make sure that they listen to us. But in the same time, we have to have some scholarship. So sometimes program evaluation can be helpful. So we developed program evaluation. We try to model it and try to understand the correlation of each factors could lead to the behavior change intention. So we collaborate with WIC and local food banks, try to expand this kind of work. So that is those two are my short examples about how we try to integrate those two, extension and research. Next, I would like to share another topic. So what kind of research I do as an extension specialist that is applied, but also meaningful. So we conducted a survey a few years back, and we tried to understand how do people perceive food safety risk. So you can see on this bar chart. So the higher the number is, means people have higher risk perception. So they feel like if I eat this, it's more likely for me to get sick. So raw meat, they know that it's more likely for me to get sick. But if you look at down below, wheat flour, tree nuts, spices, dried fruit, people don't really necessarily feel like there could be any risk associated with it, but they are raw, right? So we want to know, the first example is, I wanted to know, how do consumers interact with the foods when they have different risk perceptions? So one of the examples here I want to give you is how we conducted research around how consumers work with flours, wheat flour. So there have been multiple foodborne outbreak recalls associated with wheat flour. So, and we also see that it's not like an uncommon thing nowadays. So at first, when we don't have a lot of funding, so when we conduct research, funding is always something we need to seek to pay for the students to conduct the research and also to pay for the work we're going to do. So at the time, we didn't secure enough funding to conduct a larger study. So what we did was we conducted a content analysis. So we want to know, how do consumers act around wheat flour? So what we did was we systematically reviewed blogs with wheat flour recipes and videos showing the cooking steps when they handle wheat flour. And then we conducted a round of search, and eventually we included 85 blog recipes and 146 YouTube videos to analyze. And we found out that, especially during the video, you can see cross-contamination. That's how consumers share their proudly heritage recipes online with their friends, with their virtual community. We noticed that there have been a lot of cross-contamination, especially when they touch the raw flour and then they touch kitchen tools. And then there are even like cross-contamination between the ready-to-eat food, RTE foods, which is ready to eat, like salad or fruit or bread they want to eat. And also another thing we found that was interesting was not all consumers or recipes that didn't know food safety risks. That, in another way, is some people knows there could be food safety risk associated with wheat flour. So people would come up with those home remedies, like heat treating those flour. So we observed that people would suggesting other consumers to conduct heat treating using oven or microwave. However, those at the time were not validated. So when they say, oh, you need to bake your wheat flour for like until it's 165 degrees Fahrenheit, or until it's warm in the middle, it doesn't really have validated. Those are not validated ways. So the second thing we did was, now we know what do people do when they share the recipes, but those are not representative enough. So we want to know, what do US consumers do when we survey them? We want to ask individuals who use wheat flour. And we surveyed over 6,800 consumers, and only 1,000 participants who meet our criteria, who are frequent flour users. So when we conduct those surveys, during that month, actually there was a flour recall. And the flour recall were everywhere in the newsletter, yeah, or on the web. However, 85% of those flour users that we survey have never even heard of a flour recall or outbreak before. We also worked with some modelers. We wanted to understand whether people would handle the food differently if they have a higher risk perception. So we noticed that consumers' risk perception of raw dough is the top predictor of their flour handling behavior. And also, consumers' concern about recalls affecting their flour is the top predictor of their recall awareness. So we didn't really stop just looking at 85% of consumers who did not really hear about the recall. We also wanted to understand at the time who would be more likely to hear about the recall and why. What are the predictors for them in the future for the extension work, right? So if we want to have a targeted outreach to those consumers, who should we talk to? So I always ask this when I present this slide, which is I want to ask in the audience, have you ever eaten raw cookie dough? No? Yes? I kept telling some of my international friends, like from different cultures, I said, I think this is an US thing. So when we conduct the survey, 66% of those frequent flour users, they admitted that they have eaten or have played with raw cookie dough or batter. So that's not just about it. We need to know, we know, okay, this is a risky behavior. So how can we stop them? So the next step was I went to those flour companies to present my results. I said, you know, I really think we should do something about it, right? So consumers really don't know there have been flour recalls. They have a very low risk perception about wheat flours. If people get sick, you guys spend a lot of money to recall to mitigate all of those damages. So they're saying that, but we have messages on the packages. We told them not to eat raw dough on the packages. What else do you think we need to do? Right? So then we did go to local supermarkets. We collected over 200 flour packages, and we captured all of those messages from different background, like different color backgrounds, different font, different even messages. So I categorize them into two types of messages, one called short messages, just do not eat, right? So the first set. And then the second message, I noticed that I call them long messages. Long means more than do not eat. They give a little bit more hint. For example, the second one, you can read it more clearly. Flour is raw. So that's the reasoning, right? And then please cook fully before enjoying. That's what you should do. So we surveyed the consumers. We noticed that those who are considered older adults and those who currently are not eating raw cookie dough, they perceive those flour messages way better than those eaters. But who should we change the behavior? We need to change the behaviors of those eaters. But we noticed that no matter whether it's the message one, like do not eat, or message two, provide them a little bit wise, the eaters seems like always have the lower, like on understanding or paying attention, or I want to make the change compared to the non-eaters. And also, as I mentioned, we purchased hundreds of flour packages and we did this lab exercise. Who can find the messages first, right? We find out that even if we purposely look for messages, sometimes it's difficult. I enlarged, this is a quick bread package. I think some of you may already used it. I challenge you, can you find the food safety message? I've already zoomed in, right? I didn't really give you a whole package. Can you find the message there? Yeah? It's right here. It's in English and Spanish. So we found we had a lot of difficulties within my lab to find those messages. So we said, let's try to do something on the research wise. So we tried to collect commercially available packages and we conducted an eye tracking study. So those are just like glasses I wear, but a little bit larger and have prescriptions. So if you need to wear glasses, we can change the lenses for you. So it can capture the fixation time, fixation counts, and time to first fixation. So we use that device to help us understand when a real consumer try to look at the package, what are the first thing they see? If we ask them to purposely look for those food safety messages, what bothers them? What distractions made them to look before they really find the message? So we collected 10 commercially packages and I marked them as small, like short. So short one means the package has short messages, like I showed you, do not eat raw dough, right? So short 1 all the way short 5. So there are 5 packages with shorter messages. And there are 5 packages with longer messages. And the blue bar means the time to fixation. So that means how long it took an individual to find the food safety messages eventually, right? So that means the taller the bar means it took them longer to find the message. And those orange dots represents the percentage of participants eventually find the messages within 20 seconds. So a lot of people ask me, so 20 seconds, you didn't give them a lot of time to find the message. But if you think about that, who would look at like a flour package for 20 seconds in the kitchen, in the normal kitchen or in the restaurant, or no, in the supermarket, right? So for a consumer, the literature review we conducted, we found out that a consumer try to choose from an array of products, it took them anywhere from 7 to 13 seconds to make the decision, final decision. So 20 seconds in a real life, it's quite long just to find the food safety message. So with 47 participants we had, only 2 out of those 47 people are successfully found all 10 messages, right? So you also notice that number 5, S5, has the lowest percentage of being found and then the highest number of time consumed for people to find it. We also try to understand what could be a potential factor influencing this. So we try to measure the type size and we try to understand, but it doesn't really matter. So the larger the font, it's easier for people to pick, but no, that's not true. So this is S5. So you can see when we analyze the data, we can see that one is the means this person first fixate their eyes here. And then all the way around, they were really actively trying to find the message. And this is another person. This person started from the top and then really actively tried to find the message. So I know it's small, it's too small for you to find the message. Give a guess where the message should be. Yes. In the middle. Yes. Number 15. Eventually this person find it. It's right here. Right? So there are a lot of information on the back of the package. It's not that easy to find. So to understand why it's so difficult, we also try to understand if it was because the sequence so that's why we try to look at what was the last thing they see before they see the message. So if you look at this, we try to section, make the back package into different sections, the brand logo, and then the ingredients to cook, how to cook, the message, and then how long it should be baked, and then another like a recipe. So we noticed that actually people, a lot of the times they are looking at the baking instruction. They spend a lot of time to look at there. So we wonder, how can we better improve the message, the communication? So we did find that we thought if we deliver it longer, the message would take more space. Maybe people can find it. But apparently, based on what we find, the participants may not really like the idea to have very long messages. So we are also conducting some ongoing studies trying to understand how to attract people's attention. Should it be like stop sign, the black one, stop sign? Or should it has vivid color like the yellow one or the orange one? Should we even design something to show them that actually wheat flour came from wheat? It's raw, right? So there are a lot of ideas. So we recently conducted another round of survey, just try to understand what type of flour messages could potentially be liked. So we try to study the framing. So how can we talk to you so you may like it? So we borrowed some previous work from smoking cessation studies. So we developed messages that are control and loss framed or non-loss framed. And we found out that most of our participants liked the loss framing. And then we also found that the perceived effectiveness are quite the same, right? So the loss framing is a little bit higher. And what are consumers' preferred characteristics of a label if we want to design one? So we find out that those alert, so if we say alert on the very top, it helps them to make attention. So warning is the most preferred. And also the design, the shape of it, they didn't like the triangle ones, they like the octagon ones. And the background color, they preferred the yellow backgrounds. So what is the next step? Again, I said research, extension, research, extension. So the next step is we're going to present to the flour industry again. I can see there could be a lot of pushbacks from the marketing side. So stay in tuned. I may share more information with you in the near future about that work. So since this is department has a lot of animal science students, and I heard that many students really want to become vet. So I developed a couple of slides there. So I also wanted to know, with human food, how do consumers work with it? But what about pet foods? So there have been multiple foodborne outbreaks, recalls, not associated with human food, but actually with pet foods. A lot of people wondered why people would get sick from pet foods. So that's what I want to know too. I had dogs, and now because of my daughter's allergy, we have cat, we have rabbit, we have fish. So it's like a zoo. So I want to know, what do other people do with their pet foods? So based on the survey, we noticed that females is more likely to kiss the pets, to cuddle with the pets, to sleep with the pets. So, and female is more likely to wash hands with soap after feeding the pets. Another thing it was interesting was, so the risk perceptions may influence people's food safety behavior, like I said before. But we also ask them very similar questions for pet owners, right? Specifically cat and dog pet owners. So which foods they feel like pose the more microbial food safety risks? So again, they agreed, like the flour users, like anything about raw. But when it comes to low moisture foods, they don't really think so. And you know what? A lot of the pet foods are low moisture foods. They are dry, right? Dry pellets. Another thing we were trying to experiment was, we want to see, what do people think when we show them two different news headlines. One is the pet food, the dog treats, made 143 people sick, versus the dog treat made over 130 dogs dead, right? So which headline would trigger people to be more careful? So those two are the real headlines. So because we wanted to make sure they are talking about the same thing, so we modified the first headline to make a second headline. So let's be fair. Both headlines had 143 individuals got sick. The first one is people, the second one is pets. We noticed that the pet owners are more concerned in general when it comes to getting people sick. And we noticed that the females, dog owners, and urban versus rural, so those are people who are more concerned about the headlines. So some of the key takeaways: the pet owners, generally, they are not aware that they can contract foodborne illness from the pet foods. And also the pet owners are not practicing proper food handling practices when they feed the pets. And also demographics, who we are, does matter. We may have different behaviors around the pets, and we may have different risk levels. So let's switch gear. Now I talk a lot of the work I conducted with consumers. Do I work with farmers? Yes. Other than veteran farmers, I also work with small farmers in general. So I really like to look at the interactions between different players, like I showing you in the earlier slides. I like to see in this basketball team, right? How do my players interact with each other? So this example is how consumers work with like perceived food safety when it comes to fresh produce. So when we surveyed consumers, this is not a surprise, I think, especially for people who works in this area. Most consumers expect food safety as a minimum quality standard. If you put things on the shelf of a supermarket, that means it's safe for me to eat. How could it have E. coli or Listeria, right? So 85% of consumers believe that small farms should follow the same food safety rules required for larger farms. And 63% opposed exempting small-sized farms from any regulations. If you work with FSMA produce safety rules, you may notice that this actually is what we have, right? If you are small enough, you are exempt from a lot of those rules. But consumers doesn't agree with it. However, if we provide a very exaggerating label, this is not something approved by FDA or anyone, right? So it's just we're trying to exaggerate this situation. If we have this like food safety guaranteed label on the produce, how much would you like to buy it? So we noticed that how much more you would like to buy it. We noticed that if it is from a small size farm and has the food safety label, people are more willing to buy it and would like to pay more to buy it, right? And also, if it's a large farm, have the food safety label, they are willing to pay more to buy it. However, what you didn't know about this is, even though it seems like they are willing to pay to buy it, but most of them, they are willing to pay more, no more than 10%. That's not even enough to get any labels, right? So when we ask consumers, who is responsible for a produce outbreak? Most of them said farmers, and then produce packers. The least one is myself, right? As a consumer, no, I'm not responsible for it. But when it comes to farmers, so another of my graduate student of mine, so conducted a study with small farmers, small-sized farms. So we conducted focus groups, and we try to show them what the consumers think, right? So we show them that, okay, we surveyed the consumers think you guys should follow the same food safety guidelines as the large farms, and they're opposed to the exemptions. At first, the focus group are quite, just like today, harmony. Like we sit there, we share our practices on the farm. But after we show them the survey results, it stirred a lot of emotions. They feel like, how could they? They don't really know anything about farming. And they're saying that we should follow the same rules like larger farms. What are they saying? So they feel like we ask exactly the same questions. If there is an outbreak related with fresh produce, who should take the responsibility? To them, they felt like it should be the produce pack house, compared to where the consumers think the number one should be the farmers. It's quite different, right? So, but both of them agrees that consumers should be blamed the least. They shouldn't be blamed as much. So another example I like to share with you was I tried to study in the past couple of years, try to understand the interactions between producers or processors and inspectors. So that's another two, I would say, players, very, very important, but a lot of the times we see a lot of tension. So when we conduct this study, we had a lot of challenges recruiting participants. One of the challenge was the inspectors doesn't want to be recorded. They feel like, if you want me to be frank with you, you cannot really record me. I don't really want to be recorded. And a lot of people refused, but after 2 years of data collection, we finally got 30 participants reached the data saturation. So we find out that many of those, so we purposely recruited inspectors whose responsibility was inspecting produce drying facilities. And what I want to show you is why a lot of the processors have challenges with their own inspectors. It could be because even within the inspectors, there are a lot of discrepancies on what to follow, right? So because it's a small sample size, we don't want to sell which state it is, right? So we eventually separate the data up by regions. We notice that even within a region, there could be small discrepancies, but if you look at between the regions, there is a lot of discrepancies what should be followed. And also, those inspectors, they are requesting more education for themselves. They want more information. They want to help the processors. A lot of the times, the processors didn't really see that. So with those above talks, you may notice that we work a lot with consumers, small size processors, small size farmers. What else? Who else do we work with? So I think this presentation is built upon a lot of studies around low moisture foods. So we noticed that there have been a lot of public health and economic burdens just about low moisture foods. So we were successfully collaborating with other partners, got some funding from USDA, just working on the food safety of low moisture foods. So I was wondering if it's possible for us to study something not from individual families, kitchen, household. Can we study a commodity and learn about how do food safety culture evolves over time? It was a very big vision view. So with the help of California almond boards, we were successfully to obtain some data. So you can see that for California almonds, I know it sounds like, oh, that's just one state, but this supplies over 90% of almonds around the world. So it's a big commodity, and they did suffer from outbreaks before 2001 and 2004. But magically, after that, there was no outbreaks from this commodity, especially managed by California almonds. So we wanted to know, how was the food safety culture evolved over time after the outbreak? And also, what are the factors affecting those industry-wide adoptions? So we conducted studies. We tried to go through, we were very blessed to obtain the past 24 years meeting minutes from their committees. And we reviewed over the past 20 years news articles regarding almonds, especially the food safety of almonds. We conducted interviews with those individuals who were involved in the almond industry in the early 2000s went through the outbreaks and who are major enough, whose position are major enough to make decisions for the commodity for large companies and small, like the boards, and also interviews the current food safety managers from almond processors. So we find out that, oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Okay, sounds good. So I'm going to skip to the end. Yes. So we did a lot of engagement, a lot of fun. That's why I really like extension. We work with kids from the industry, from the community. We visited like food banks. That's the last but not least slides I want to show you, which is I always think like food science, food safety is a small enough field that everyone knows each other. But it's also a large enough field for you always to find your own specialized area to fit, to make this a better better world and better science. So with that, I'm going to end my presentation.
Thank you. Any question, please make it quick. Let's have a few questions quickly. Can you please pass it?
Oh, okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I just want to know, have you found acceptability by consumers or target group problematic as an extension specialist?
So let me reframe your, let me try to see if I understand you, like your question a little bit better. So your question is, what are the challenges I had working with consumers?
Yeah, whether the findings you have are being accepted by the target group.
The reception of the target
Group.
group, your findings.
Mm-hmm. Uh-huh.
Are they receptive? Are they not receptive? What's,
Mm.
they welcome your inputs? Or-
So let me try to reframe. So your question is, when I try to present the research findings, are those consumers receptive? How receptive they are? It really depending on the topic we're talking about, right? So when it comes to topics like yes, you should like use thermometer. Give you an example, like use meat thermometer. That one usually it's not as well received, especially by experienced chefs in the house, right? So I have had a lot of like challenges, I would say, with just different topics. However, if when it comes to things like hand washing, we did a study, I didn't present here, during the pandemic. We surveyed US consumers every single month, asking them whether they wash their hands and how they wash their hands. We noticed that like there have been a steady like up in the beginning of the pandemic, but when the vaccine, the news about vaccine, it's not even, you haven't even got the vaccine yet. The news about vaccine out that month, the hand washing goes down, right? So yes, there are two sides of your question to answer your question. One is depending on the topic, whether or not they accept, they would be receptive of your findings. The second one is if you are talking about consumers, it's an evolving like education route. It's not like I reach out to them, they made the change. You do need to follow up. So their practices evolves just like how much TikTok and other like trendy things are going around. We need to keep following up with them. It's a continuing uphill battles a lot of the times when it comes to food safety, messages. Yeah.
Yeah, we have one more time for one more question, please.
How to find a grocery store which is having a lower contamination microbial risk? How to find it? And I have a comment here. Looking at the contamination and the problem, these problems are not being brought up by the consumers. They are generated somewhere else. So why do you want to put all the burden on the consumers instead of others?
That's a very good question. So two questions. One is, how can you find a low risk, low cross-contamination risk grocery stores? So, and the second question is why, like, we should put all the burdens to the consumers. So I think the second question and the first question are quite like, you're answering your question itself. So when it comes to supermarkets, we rely on the staff to maintain the cleanliness, but we also rely on the consumers who shop there to really maintain the cleanliness, right? So what I see sometimes, it's not just about how many staff are there. It's also about who shops there. So the second question is about consumers. Why we should give all the burdens to consumers? It may be because I presented today more about what we did with consumers. But actually, if you look at how rigorous the food safety programs being put towards meat processors, how much training they have to go through versus how minimum our consumers receive food safety training, it would be a different story you would see. So there are regulations, regulate the processors, the farmers, and no regulators would visit homes and examine what they do. And a lot of the times, I think we need to face this if we sterilize all of our produce and meat. That's an ideal world, but that means higher cost, right? So if we want to continue maintain the cost, sometimes we have to think about ways how our consumers can get nutritious and safe food, and they get a control also of the price. So I feel like those are million-dollar questions. And every day, I think we try to work a little bit towards the final goals to reduce foodborne illness from the cases we see. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. And let's give our speaker a round of applause, please.